All right, we are now documenting our meeting. This is Joe Bolus. It's September the 25th, and this is a Clinical Coach 2 session for MELS 601, Dr. Church's class. So I hope everybody's doing well and making it through the week. Man, we're right in it now. It didn't even seem like there was a summer break. To me, it maybe not for you, but to me, I don't even feel like I had a summer break. So first day of autumn started this week, and we still got July temperatures. So man, get out and enjoy it while you can. Before we get started with the agenda, I just want to kind of open up the mic, if you will, and see if anybody has any questions in relation to ABSL 1, ABSL 2, Task 1, Task 2, or anything in general terms about feedback that I may have gave out in the Blackboard shell as I reviewed and gave feedback. It was a busy week, and I did get a little bit behind on giving feedback to some of you, and I do apologize for that. I kind of ironed out the routine, if you will. I've got a heavy cohort this semester, which is no excuse. It just take me a while to kind of get everything into play, but that should not happen again. As far as delay getting response, my goal is 24 hours. My goal is on Friday evenings to give review and feedback on everything in Blackboard, so you will have the weekend to kind of work on any revisions. So with that being said, does anyone have any questions on ABSL 1, ABSL 2, or any general questions regarding my feedback? If you have specific questions that you might not want to ask in this forum, you can contact me later, and we can talk individually. All right. Well, we will go ahead and get started on the agenda tonight. It's pretty packed, but hopefully there are some things at this point that you need to become aware of as far as task stream. We'll kind of get into that, so on and so forth. I'll hold it to an hour or less. If we don't get done in an hour, we'll stop and then we'll pick it up next time. But first thing I want to do tonight, I want to talk about task 3 and 4 in the ABSL. I wanted to kind of do a Blackboard review. I don't think that's going to take long because everybody seems to kind of be getting that process in place. But I want to go back and review Blackboard in relation to task stream. So we're going to talk about task stream tonight. I'm going to take you into task stream, and we're going to look at some of the components of task stream and what's the difference in task stream and what's the difference in Blackboard in regards to you graduating and getting your license. Within task stream, we're going to talk about that competency folio that you've heard me mention a couple of times. There's some pieces of task stream that we won't talk about tonight because we'll just say that for a later date. You're not to that point yet. And we'll talk a little bit also about your internship hours and how that's going for you. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm back in the scale handbook, and this is kind of where I always start. You'll see this populated on my screen several times during our sessions over the program. But I just wanted to draw your attention. If you haven't taken the time to go through this, it would really benefit you to do that. I'm not saying read every word, but there's some terms that Dr. Church has used, that I use, and things we have referred to. And if you look through here, some things in the rubric, if you look through here, you're going to go, oh, so that's where that came from. And there's one thing, there's actually two things, but I'm going to skip over one for now. There's one thing that I want to make sure that you have looked at, and that's the performance outcomes and alignment to task for the ABSL. This is what you're expected to have learned at the end of the program. And even in the rubric, I think even in the rubric for task 3, it talks about SLOs. Make sure those SLOs have been taken care of. So for task 3, candidates demonstrate the ability to use technology to enhance student learning and transform schools. And I want to talk a little bit about the digital learning competencies and how they're embedded within the task, and what that means to you in regards to task stream and the competency folio. And this is one of those examples. As you're working through task 3, a lot of it is using technology and representing some products through different means of technology, and that's a student learning outcome that's anticipated that you will have become proficient at in ABSL 3. And ABSL, and you can see all through the ABSL number 3, that's just using data to advocate for your students and to advocate student learning in your site. 4 is all about advocating to your stakeholders and utilizing the knowledge and tools that you've accumulated to have a positive impact on your educational environment. So if you haven't took the time or taken the time to go through and look at these in relation to what task you're doing, and it might just help you kind of frame that in your mind a little bit better of what you need to show as you're going through your narrative and doing your appendix and collecting your artifacts. So it's just a good FYI piece that to kind of help you wrap your head. And this is throughout the scale handbook, but we were just, of course, talking about ABSL. So let's move on down to ABSL Task 3, and I'm going to stop at the prompts. We're going to talk about prompt 1 and prompt 2. So, okay, in short version, task 1, you got permission to set up a professional learning community by your site supervisor, your principal. In task 1, you did all this research, 3 to 5 resources that showed you had theoretical knowledge of not only what a professional learning community is, but also how to set one up. Do4 does a great job. I don't know if you guys, I've seen some of the references that refer to getting started. It's an old book by now. I remember when it was a new book, but it's an old text now. But it talks about what to do to create a professional learning community. It talks about the 3 big ideals, the essential questions, some of the initial first steps that you make sure that you want to have down as you create a professional learning community. So you showed all that research. All right, and then in task 1, you picked your team. You showed why they are on the team, their strengths, what their role is within the professional learning community, and you had your first meeting. And your first meeting basically is to do some of those initial steps of creating a professional learning community, letting the team know what the mission or the purpose of the PLC is, kind of setting up roles and responsibilities within the team, and kind of talk about how the dynamics of the team is going to work. And then also is kind of I lost my train of thought, but we had the mission, setting those norms and protocols. That's very important for you to show, is that you have established those norms for that team to begin that meeting. And if you don't know what I'm talking about by norms and protocols, you need to go back to the PLC research and find out what that is. Okay, so you got that nailed down. Okay, in task 2, you're pulling in all this data. You may have a general direction of what you want to look at, but you don't know specifically until you do the data analysis. So in that task 1 and 2, don't come into the narrative saying, well, it's 5th grade reading and we're going to have a positive effect on 5th grade reading. Well, you know, you might have a general idea that that's where a gap is, but you don't know specifically until you show the data that you and your team has analyzed. And then where are those specific gaps within that data analysis that your team and you agree upon as an area in need of improvement that you guys want to focus on. Now, if you kind of already have all that because of some of the meetings that you've done just in general in your school, that's fine, but you don't want to show that until you do the data analysis. So in task 1, you don't want to talk about that. You want to save that for the data analysis and kind of highlight some of those gaps that you identified in the needs. And that brings us to 3. Okay, so in 3, okay, in 2, you identified the learning gap. or you identified the need and the need assessment that you want to address. All right. Whatever that may be, then what you're doing at this point in task 3 is you're going back to the literature. You're going back to the research and you're saying, okay, what out there is a proven evidence-based practice that has had in other areas a positive impact on this need. If it's a common need like 5th grade reading scores or something like that, which is an example I gave a while ago, there may be a lot of research out there on some type, and I'll get into the specifics a little bit more on what out there has a positive impact on this. I'm not necessarily talking about vendor. If you go to the vendors of Edmonton, then they're going to tell you, oh yeah, this, if you go to Exact Path in middle school, they're going to tell you we've got research to prove this is the best thing coming and going to address some of your English language arts standards. Well, that's okay that the vendor says that, but is there any outside research that shows that too? So what's that evidence-based practice that has a positive impact on that need that you identify? So what you do is you do another literature review, you do another research along the lines of what you did in task 1, but you're to create an annotated bibliography. Now, that's a specific form of showing a literature review. And if you'll remember, I sent some information out from Dr. Stedman, one of our colleagues in the department, about what an annotated bibliography is, how it needs to be set up, and we'll kind of talk about some of that here in a little bit. But it features descriptions of several best practices and specifically why they were considered for the problem that you've identified and are working on this semester in your school. Okay, so that annotated bibliography does not come at the end of the task, but that comes within the narrative itself. You are to present your findings to your PLC. So you go out and you do research. Okay, you identified your need. What evidence-based practices are out there that says they have a positive impact on that need? You pull all that information together, put it in the form of annotated bibliography, and you present that to your PLC team. And then you guys have a collaborative conversation that aligns those best practices with the academic needs assessment that you completed in task 2. Then for this assignment, if you look up here, for the purpose of the assignment, the best practice suggestions must all utilize a form of technology not already being in use school with the targeted population. So your best practice suggestion must utilize a form of technology that's not already being used with the targeted population. It can be being used in the school, but it must not be used with this targeted population of whatever your needs assessment is. Your PLC for task 3 will develop a graphic organizer and a visual that demonstrates the relationship between the need and the best practice in preparation for task 4, which is going to be an action plan. So prompt 1, go back to prompt 1. All right, you're going to create an annotated bibliography that you will feature in your narrative to evidence and illustrate resources for best practices in the identified need area, including a section that features online tools to support the teacher and the student. That's the technology part. Please note that you are not just to have an annotated bibliography, you are to include that in your narrative. As I mentioned before, the narrative would be a short literature review that's mentioned in the description of the task. So if I'm gonna stop right here. Is there any questions about prompt 1 of this task 3? Okay, I see some. You put it on like a great face of understanding what I'm saying. I see some faces is like, what the heck is he talking about? So don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. So let's move to prompt 2. Oh,
I have a question on that.
Question. Yes, sir.
So you kind of hit on something, but when we're doing the research on this is something that I'm still trying to make sure I'm doing correctly. You said a very thing I know, which is that a lot of the vendors will, provide research and provide things, and it's how do we know? I mean, yes, I know we can look, but in today's world, there's a lot of stuff that's backed up. And is there kind of a tried and true way to know that we're getting actual, true research from a third party and not something that's backed three deep by some company that's just trying to sell us textbooks or whatever?
That is a great question. And, as an administrator, and I'm going through this right now as with my 4 middle schools on ELA adoption, we're looking at HMH and into literature. And so I'm kind of having the same conversation. If you got time to have that conversation, it's great. You guys don't necessarily have that, but you put that off on the vendor. You put that on them. Show me the evidence-based third-party research that supports what you're claiming, not what you paid for, or not what you picked out of context and put in there, but where's the research that says this? You don't necessarily have that. So when you look at these evidence-based practices, look for something outside. Do a Google search for something outside the vendor. If you do have contact with the vendor of whatever you're looking at, then feel free to contact them and ask them for some of that. With the time frame that you're in right now, just do the best that you can. I'm not going to go through here and look at your citations and your references and dig into myself to see exactly where that came from. And then there's just some things out there that's basically common knowledge. So you don't have to dig that deep, but while you're doing that literature review, look for third-party confirmations or affirmations of what that vendor's doing, if it's there. If it's not there, don't spend a lot of time digging for it. Just for the very nature of, we want to get through the semester. We want to make sure that you stay on track finishing the program or finishing the semester. It's a great question. Okay, anything else? And we'll move to prompt 2.
Am I muted? No?
No, you're not. I can hear you.
Okay. I don't know. My screen just changed, so I can't see you anymore. So it's weird. But I had a question. Can you give an example of what you might mean by another form of technology that's not already being used?
Yeah, and I've got that in my notes later on that will address that. But it really depends on where the needs assessment led you in task 2. And then look at that part of the school or grade level or what, and see what technology is already in place, and determine if there's another technology that will be applicable. SRI, like I mentioned, Adminum, ExactPath a while ago, some of those technology-based programs that's open to teachers. Now, keep in mind, you're not going to have to implement this. So don't feel like you're going to have to, you're looking for a technology-based solution to a needs assessment and you find something that's $250,000. You go think, well, how am I going to implement this? This is just on paper now. Your principal may choose to implement it, but it's just doing the research and doing an action plan up to that point. It doesn't necessarily have to be implemented. So don't let that limit you in your research or what you're looking at. Well, I can only look at things that we can afford. You don't have to do that right now. But when you find what that need is, then do that research on how has that need been addressed by others and what have they used. And it does need to be something technology based.
Okay. I'm just thinking, I'm working at the preschool level. And so a lot of our discussions are driven around preschoolers and children spending too much time with technology. And so it'll just be interesting thinking of trying to add more technology.
I understand. That was, like I said, we're going through ELA adoption with HMH, and that's one of the things I talked to them is, I want a blended delivery system. I don't want it all to be technology. There's still value in the kid holding the book and turning the page. So just know that this isn't something that you have to implement. This is just the steps leading up to that. And, if your principal chooses to implement it, then that's great, fantastic, good for you. But it doesn't mean that the school has to. But in terms of satisfying the rubric, it does need to be a technology-based solution. All right, so in prompt 2 of task 3, you detail how the PLC basically, you're just going to create multiple graphic organizers that shows the relationship between the need and how those evidence-based strategies that you develop, that you found, how they address that. So detail how the PLC created and used multiple graphic organizers and visuals. It just doesn't have to be, so it can kind of be a PowerPoint presentation. You may be able to pull a lot of that, some of those visuals. Don't think just in terms of graphic organizers. But how, of that research, that evidence-based research, how did they represent that this is going to positively have a positive impact on that need? So some of the graphics and tables that you find out there, you can duplicate. Just make sure that you cite the source. Embed that into your narrative to demonstrate how the PLC projects that chosen best strategy might be applicable to the need. Remember that the best practice strategy suggests the use of a technology not already being used in school. Now, let's jump down here to the rubric. So to get proficient on this, you need to research a minimum of 3 sources, 3 evidence-based strategies that's said to have had a positive impact on your needs assessment. You need to include, here we go. I'm on task 1, I'm sorry. The annotated bibliography and online tools demonstrate knowledge of best instructional practices. And really, you need more than 3. I would say at least 5, if you can find them. If it's something relatively new, you might not be able to find a lot of research or literature on that. If not, then contact me, okay? And shoot me an email and let me know. But you need to show how the research-based strategies mesh up with the need that you developed in task 2, and you need to show how your team looked at those and developed a presentation. It could be a PowerPoint on here's the need, here's the possible solution, and here's some evidence and visuals that show why this solution has a positive impact. It's not you saying it, it's not your team saying it, it's what the research says that you guys have gone out there and found. So to receive a rating of proficient, annotated bibliography and online tools demonstrate knowledge of best instructional practice associated with the identified need. Utilize data to specify the needs and provide evidence that research-based strategies will be used to address the needs, and the narrative features references to sources from the research with multiple visuals, not necessarily graphic organizers, but just visuals to illustrate and help detail the PLC's projected impact on the identified need. So how is that going to affect and have an impact on that need? To get a 4 is that you really do a good job of showing how that evidence-based strategies that you found is going to have a positive impact on that need. So it exceeds established expectations. So that's objective, and that's subjective, and I know that it is, but that's the way to accomplish this. So you just do a really good job of showing the research-based strategies that you develop or that you found, how they're going to have a positive impact on that need. Now, I'm going to go over some of the helpful hints. Yeah, sure.
So this paper can be turned in before we present these to our PLC, because it doesn't seem like it has a narrative part that we need to talk about, how we talked about with our PLC. Is that correct or no?
That is a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. No, you do need, you go out as an individual, as a candidate, and you pull in all of those evidence-based strategies that addresses the need, and you develop that annotated bibliography, and you take that annotated bibliography to your PLC team. You guys go through that research that you found and determine how it's going to impact the need, and then your team, you leading the team and facilitating the team, create some visuals basically as a presentation or a representation of how those evidence-based strategies are going to have a positive impact on that need. So yes, there is a narrative here. It's not just the bibliography and the visual. There is a narrative about how you use that bibliography and have those collaborative conversations with your team to develop those graphic organizers and those visuals. So yes, there is a narrative piece to this, and you have to facilitate and show your facilitation and your leadership and kind of having that conversation, using that information with your team. Great question.
I have a question. Oh,
My question is, now I know you said we don't have to implement it necessarily. We don't have to do it. It's up to our, but my question is, and I'm not being negative Nancy, I promise. My question is, how can we do all these meetings and take up all these people's time and come to them and say, well, we're not implementing this, or we don't have to implement this, you know? And I'm really skeptical because I have stakeholders outside of the school. It's just not my 5th grade team. I have stakeholders from the community as well. So I'm confused.
That is a great question. I'm glad you asked that for clarification, Gina. You don't tell your team that you're not going to implement this. Don't tell them that. And you may not even think that. You go forward wide open like I'm going to implement this. But at the end of the day, it's really up to your principal and your school improvement team and your leadership team if they choose to implement this plan. So, I'm just saying, don't let that limit don't let the thought that, well, that's something we can't afford, or that's something that I know they'll never go past my principal. Don't limit your thinking in the evidence-based strategies out there that you could be used in the school. Because, if you do the research and you show the connection and you show that it has a positive impact, man, go ahead and create a plan like you're going to move forward on it. But at the end of the day, it's up to your leadership team whether they chose. Because in task, and at the end of this ABSL, one of the final things you do is present this to the leadership team. And as a matter of fact, I think it's the difference between a 3 and a 4. 4 being that the leadership team or the principal chooses to implement your recommendations. Great questions. Yeah, don't walk in there and say, well, I'm going to show y'all this, but heck, we're not going to do it. Don't do that. Don't do that. I'm so glad you asked that question. Good job. All right. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, it's okay. I have a question about technology integration and evidence-based practices. I am using a lot in my classroom, a flipped classroom technique this year, where we are incorporating videos and students are learning via their Chromebooks. That is a research practice. Does that count as a technology integration, even though it may not be a website? It's something that we, the teachers, are creating. Would that count as part of that technology piece?
Absolutely. Canvas can be used in this as well. I mean, you guys are asking great questions tonight, and I really appreciate it. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a canned program. It's some technological approach, and there's a lot of technological approaches out there that's not vendor motivated, that's still good practice in the classroom, especially if in regards to project personalized learning, pathways for students, and as far as personalized learning and using some of those different techniques of stuff that you already have on hand can certainly be one of those evidence-based strategies that you look at. Absolutely. Good comment. Thank you.
And I have something sort of that correlates with that. Like I'm having my kids, I'm doing advanced math this year. And so I'm having, and they don't really have note studying skills or note taking skills, to be honest, but I write too much on the board. But anyway, but one of the things that I'm having them do, and we're going to try to do across the board, at least 4, 3, 5, we don't know, we haven't, came to a consensus and have that meeting yet, is have them to either use their devices to study notes, videotape themselves, and then listen to themselves to get note-taking studying skills. to acquire note-taking study skills, which hopefully will enhance their understanding and mastery of concepts and skills. Would that be included in technology or no?
Now, and it could be, Gina. The first question I would ask is, would you and your team be able, well, first of all, is there research out there that shows that that's a best evidence-based strategy? And if there is, does that strategy, is it connected? Does it mesh with the identified gap or the need that you guys chose to work on in task 2? So that's a conversation you need to have with your PLC. Is okay, is there support out there for doing this? Is it an evidence base? Is it a good practice? Is it the best practice? And if there is, does that best practice address what we identified? So does those note-taking skills have an improvement in that area? Has that been shown to improve academic achievement for students in advanced math, or really any classroom that you want to just kind of show that connection? And that's a conversation that you have with your professional learning community. And that's part of that narrative that you need to put into that document, because that's good information to show. That's a rich conversation that can happen.
I have one other question too.
Yes.
When one of my problems is I tend to like overthink things, so this may just be an overthinking question. When we're looking at data, my principal has asked me to specifically focus more on attendance and period attendance, because that's one of the areas that we're weakest on, and look at, kind of focus in on that and see if I can use that as part of this, so maybe I could actually help the school, that kind of thing.
Sure.
So when I'm going through data, I've been primarily focusing on data that would be relevant to that area. And I haven't spent as much time with like just general data as like, other test scores and stuff like that. Is that appropriate? Am I doing the appropriate approach in this or whatnot?
Yes, you are. And there may be some clinical coaches that disagree with me, or even some course instructors disagree with me. I know Dr. Church wouldn't. It's a fine line. And once again, this is another great question. It's a fine line. But if you're a principal, the person who determines whether you have a job next year and does your evaluation says that he wants to utilize your skills in this area, then I would do the exact same thing that you're doing, because you've got to work there. Even, you got to get to that point to where you get hired as assistant principal and a school administrator, and you can go and do your own thing and, and save the world. But if you get a direction and it doesn't have to be the principal, coming and telling you what to do, but if you guys are talking together, that principal is very knowledgeable about what that school needs or that site needs, and you don't want to discredit any of that knowledge or experience that that principal has, even if it's a new principal, but they may have took the time to go through the data themselves and know what area they want to address. If they kind of guide you in that direction, and you can then go in that direction. I would say given an opposing view. I don't want to say argue, but I would say given an opposing view for another day. Yeah, you did. I would do exactly what you're doing. Sure would.
I want to make sure, because he's not like demanded I do it, but
right.
He wants. And I completely understand. He wants something authentic that can actually hopefully come out and help the school and, be a positive thing at the end for everybody. So.
And that benefits you too. Because it is authentic, and you're not just doing it to jump through the hoops. And I think that's one of the best things about this program, and why it's better than the other programs out there, is you are actually hands-on experience that's going to benefit your school, but puts you through some of the routines that a principal goes through. And this, I love the app, so I'm glad it's the first one, and I'm glad that they put it on here for you guys to go through this, because I didn't have this experience when I was coming through the program, and I had to learn all this on the fly with all the other stuff that a principal has or an assistant principal has coming at them. So this is good stuff. So yes, sir, the value is in the authenticity of this program and what you're doing. Okay, I'm going to move to task 4. Task 4 is basically developing an action plan. Okay, we'll look at the prompt here because the prompts are duplicated here in the rubric as they are up top. But you're going to lead your team in, okay, first you go through those evidence-based strategies. You do those graphics and visuals in task 3s that shows, this is what we're going to choose, and this is how it's going to benefit the students. And then you develop an action plan. And an action plan has, Google action plan research. As a matter of fact, I always tell my candidates and my interns, maybe at the beginning of this task, show that you went out there and you have theoretical knowledge of what an action plan is and how one is to be set up. So do some references, do some research in that area as well. That makes for a strong submission and showing that you know what an action plan is, because you throw some research, not anything major, doesn't have to be 3 to 5 sources, nothing like that, but just do some research on what an action plan is and how it needs to be set up. There's a strategy, there's a timeline, there's an evaluation, there's a person responsible. All that's included in the action plan, but whatever you choose in the action plan, it has to go back to that evidence-based strategy or strategies that your team decided upon in task 3. So you want to talk about the importance of an action plan, and that's a good place to do your research and show your research. And here's what I talked about a while ago. Your action plan is going to line up with those SLOs that are mentioned earlier in the scale book that we looked at. It needs to contain some short, mid, and long-term goals, some specific strategies, and this is you and your team developing this. You don't do this in a silo. This is you and your team developing this as a team. So there's some delegation that can go on here. So all this is just not on your shoulders to develop. What are some indicators of how you're going to evaluate that? How are you going to know if you implement this and implement this evidence-based strategy at the end of the day, how are you going to know it was successful? So what are you going to identify as indicators of success? We will know that it had a positive impact if we see this, this, and this. And clarification of the roles, that's the person responsible type thing. And then assessment criteria goes back to the indicators of success as how are you going to assess this action plan to determine its value later on. That's prompt 1. Prompt 2 is you meet with your administrative team, your leadership team, and you give that presentation. It can be however you choose to do it. It's a good opportunity to collect some artifacts of you, maybe a video clip of you presenting this, but you present your action plan, you present your data, you present the evidence-based strategies, present the graphic or visuals that you created, you present the action plan to the team, and you present it in these terms: is how is it going to build efficacy in the building? What are the strategies for growth? Does it address the diversity in your building? What are some resources that's going to be needed? And how does this how does this mesh with the school's shared vision of learning, or what's your team's shared vision of learning? So all that needs to be a part of that presentation. So you develop the action plan. Okay, you demonstrate you have knowledge and understanding related to the investigation, the systemic investigation of needs and solutions through assigned technologies. Once again, remember that this is the key here in showing this. And then you work with your PLC to do that action plan and articulate it to the school leadership team. That's proficient. Now, if you look, this is what we discussed a while ago. Okay, difference between the 3 and the 4, working with the school leadership team, the candidate and the PLC members have implemented research-based strategies to convincingly meet the learning needs of the students. And so that is implementing that action plan. Okay, I'm going to move to, and that's basically all that task 4 is. I'm going to move over because I saw something pop up in the chat here. Okay, from so if we know that a school, so if we know that as a school we are down in math scores, and I believe the individualized computer program, iReady, will help to catch areas students struggle in, will that be a focus for the task? Yes, it can be. But once again, what other evidence, you can't, when you show that annotated bibliography, you just don't want to focus on iReady. What are some other options out there? And then you have that conversation with your team. Is iReady the best solution to what we identified? And yes, it can be the focus of the task, but once again, as a true PLC and as a leader, you want to show that you have the competency in having doing a collaborative inquiry, as mentioned in PLC research, and you guys having a conversation, and as a group coming to a consensus of what needs to happen. And you can facilitate that conversation, you can lead that conversation, but you need to show that, the days of a principal just making I'm deciding this and deciding this and deciding that are over with. It's all about collaboration and shared decision making. Okay. Any questions on task 4? Okay. All right. So I'm going to leave the handbook and I am going to go into Blackboard. Real quick review. As you finish your task, you put them here into task for review, and I will go in and look and give you feedback, and then you can revise based on my feedback. Once all the revision process is completed, then I will tell you upload to evaluation Dropbox, and then you upload to the evaluation Dropbox for a grade. Don't upload to the Dropbox until I tell you to do so. And we do one task at a time. There we go. We do task 1 once we get it completed, and as you're waiting on feedback from me, it doesn't mean you can't go ahead and work ahead. I'm just saying that we get task 1 done and get it in good shape before we move to task 2 as far as giving a grade for it. So task 1, you get feedback, revise. I'll tell you to upload to the Dropbox. Then you go down here and you upload to the Dropbox. And it's, like I said, it's one task at a time. Sorry about that. It clicked off on it. Okay. So we do task 1, task 2, task 3, task 4, task 5. At the end of task 5, I will give you instructions on what to do your final evidence narrative. And then after you do your final evidence narrative, and that's just all of those tasks put into one complete document, one title page, one reference page, one appendices. So you take all these individual parts and you make them as a whole, one whole document. That's what the absolute final evidence narrative is. So what that's doing is that's getting you ready to submit to TaskStream for evaluation. So that's why we do all of the revision and the grading, and as far as the individual parts go, because we get that individual part set, we can put it aside for now, work on the next one, When we go down to task 5, we got all those individual parts in great shape, 100 on every one of them. Then we take those individual parts and we combine them into one whole document. You submit it to the absolute final evidence narrative. And that's just another look for me of what that gives me another chance to look at it as one complete document, just to make sure that it's ready to go to TaskStream. Okay. Now, in the program, you're basically working within 2 platforms. One platform is your Blackboard, and in your Blackboard you have 2 sub compartments. One compartment is your course work with Dr. Church. Another compartment is your clinical work with me. Okay, so then the other platform that you have in this program is TaskStream, and we're going to get into that in a minute. So I want you to think of it in terms of this. There's for you to be a principal, 2 things have to happen. One thing, or an assistant principal or a school administrator. One thing is you have to graduate from an accredited university with a master's in school leadership. The second thing that needs to happen is you have to get school licensure from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction so you can get your superintendent's license, which is the license that you'll need to be an assistant principal, superintendent, so on and so forth. So those two things need to happen. All the work that you're doing in Blackboard is satisfying the university's requirement so you can get your diploma. So what you're doing in Blackboard for Dr. Church in your course shell, what you're doing for me in your internship shell, is making sure that you get that diploma and that you leave Gardner-Webb with the master's in school administration. Now, it's just like when you got your teaching, you were able to become a teacher. Just graduating from the university and get your degree doesn't necessarily make you a teacher. You have to get that license as well. Same thing here. So the Blackboard coursework, the Blackboard clinical work, that's satisfying everything that Gardner-Webb requires for you to get that master's and you to get that diploma. All right. You still have to get your licensure. All right. Now, technically, the clinical part, the part with me, is that transition piece that's going to transition you. It's the connection. It's the conduit that connects the licensure and the diploma. And that's the clinical piece that you're doing right now. And so what we're doing is we're getting you in shape at that point to get your licensure. Now, to get your licensure, you have to satisfy the requirements in task stream. So once again, you got to get your diploma and you got to get your license. Everything that you're doing here in Blackboard with Dr. Church and me is helping you get that diploma from the University of Gardner-Webb. Now Gardner-Webb will facilitate it, but to get your license, you have to satisfy the requirements in task stream. So let's go into task stream. And don't worry, I'm going to go over this again the next time we meet and just kind of make sure that I review it and everybody has a good understanding of why you're having to do these two things. Why do I have to do some things in Blackboard? Why do I have to do some things in task stream? Task stream, what you're doing in task stream is what we send to DPI to prove that you are have the potential of getting your school licensure. Now, you should have already got your task stream accounts. If you haven't got your information about your task stream accounts from Gardner-Webb yet, send me an email and let me know. You should have already done that. So you go to task stream. Okay, now mine is going to look totally different from yours, so don't get hung up on that. There's going to be some similarities here in just a moment. Okay, now just like in Blackboard, you have two compartments that you work in, your course shell and your internship shell. Here in task stream, you have two compartments that you work in. One is called your directed response folio, DRF. I know I'm throwing another acronym at you and I apologize, but DRF and your competency folio. Those are the two compartments that you work inside of task stream. So I'm going to show you the DRF right now. And this is just a sample DRF. So once let's say you get that final evidence narrative done, you took all them individual tasks, you put them into one document, one cover page, all the tasks combined into one document, and then you have one reference page, one dependence, and you're good to go. And I say, okay, submit to task stream. You are now ready to submit to task stream. Well, after that, you need to do the turn it in process with Dr. Church. And he should, if he hadn't already mentioned that to you, he will. But once he and I say, okay, you're ready for task stream, then you go into task stream and you'll see something that looks like this. This is your direct response folio. This is your DRF. And if you'll notice, here on the side is all the semesters and the programs that you're going to do to satisfy all the evidences plus a few things. Okay, so you're in MELS 601. So in MELS 601, when you get ready, when we say, okay, this is ready for task stream, take your ABSL and upload it to task stream, you upload it right here into the DRF. And this is where it's going to be evaluated by an anonymous evaluator Usually it's a retired professor. It could be, it's just whoever Gardner Webb is contract. I don't know who it is. They're anonymous, but they take your APSL. They take that rubric that we've been looking at and working from in the APSL, and they will give you a 3 or a 4. 3 is proficient, 4 is accomplished, you're good to go. If it's less than 3, if it's a 2, and you haven't satisfied all the rubric, they will contact you and say, you know, your score is below proficient, you need to revise. If that happens, you contact me immediately, and I'll work with you to get that back in good shape. That rarely happens. I think in my, what is this, my 13th year? In my 13th year, I might have had to work with 4 or 5 to revise. So that's a rarity. That's why I'm so anal about getting these tasks right and looking at these rubrics and doing all that hard work at the front end, so we're not surprised at the end of the semester. Okay, so you submit your APSL here, and that you get that grade, and this is what's going to get you your licensure as you go through the program. Now you'll notice there's 2 other things here under MELS 601. One's called the competency analysis, and one is called the School of Ed dispositions. I'm not going to go over those right now. We'll talk about that because neither one of those have to be done right now. They can be done later on in the semester. So maybe when we get back together and talk in a couple of weeks, I'll go over that. But then here's your requirements for 602, 603, so on and so forth. But we're going to stay with 601. All right, so you take that APSL, that final evidence narrative, you give it to Dr. Church, put it in, turn it in. He says, ready for task stream. I say ready for task stream. You come up here, you upload it, it gets evaluated, you score 3 or 4, you're done with the APSL. That's all that you need to do from this point forward with the APSL. Now, the other compartment in task stream that you need to do some stuff in and upload some stuff is called a competency folio. You get to your competency folio by going up to this banner, and where it says folios and web pages, you click on that. Now you won't have anything here. It'll be a blank because you'll need to create this. If you'll see right up here where it says create new, you need to create your competency folio. And basically all it is just an electronic portfolio. I want you to think of it in terms of like a photographer or when they go and they apply for a job. You know, they want to see, it's okay for you to sit there and tell them what a great photographer that you are, but the person interviewing you wants to see the proof. And they bring portfolios, or an artist, they bring portfolios. And what those are, those artifacts that they've created that shows their skill and their competency in that area. So when I go in for a job interview for becoming a photographer, then I'm going to take a book full of photographs that I've taken in the past that's going to show my competency of being a great photographer. If I'm an artist, I'm going to go in and I'm going to take a book that shows the different pictures and the different art that I created. It's an artifact, a product that shows my evidence as being a competent, skilled artist. So think of this in the same terms. It's just not a book that contains your artifacts, but it's an electronic portfolio that contains your artifacts that shows your skills as a school leader and a leadership role. So you can manipulate this, and I'll talk about how to create it here in a second. But you can edit this, you can change the color, you can do the background different. It's basically just a website that you create. Now, how do you create this? If you'll go back into the Blackboard and you look under Video Library, there is a quick 2-minute video where Dr. Lamb takes you through setting up and creating your competency folio. All right, so that's the video. You'll find it in my video library. I think Dr. Church probably has it in his too, but you can definitely find it in mine that shows you and takes you through creating this competency folio. Okay, I'm gonna check with the chat box here for just a second.
I have a question too. The artifacts or the competency folio that you're speaking of, can we continually be adding to that throughout?
Yes. You create this in 601, and a great question, Jesse, and it falls right in line with the question from Jeanette. This is something that you're going to work on the whole program. We're going to talk about this. We're going to have a lot of conversations about this competency folio, and I'm going to guide you through each semester to make sure this is in great shape and you're putting the artifacts that you need to into this folio.
So should we wait for more guidance on that, or can we just on our own go ahead and, is there a certain format, I guess is what I'm asking, for how things are uploaded?
Yeah, great question. I'm getting ready to get into that. Right now, I want you to go ahead and create your competency folio. Send me an email when you create it. So let's go ahead and get in, because I'm going to answer those questions. This is a sample one that I created. This is just one that I did. Okay. If you'll notice in your competency folio, here are all the 21 competencies that you must be proficient in, and competencies of a leader that's going to get you licensure. So you do all the narrative. You talk about what you did in the ABSL and the other evidences as you progress through the program. But here's where you show those artifacts. Remember, I told you, save those agendas, save those minutes from the meeting, video clip of you doing a presentation. Put that in the end in the appendix. I like to see them in the ABSL as you write the ABSL. I like to see them in the appendix because I know that you've got them at that point in time. But then you take those artifacts and you upload them here. So you don't have to address each competency every semester. If you'll notice, when you pull up communication, it tells you in communication that the ABSL, the activities that you do in the ABSL, you can provide evidence of communication here. What would that be? Well, that's an email from you and your principal setting up the PLC, or getting permission to the PLC, or the emails that you sent out to your PLC team talking about getting together. Some of you even gave pre-work for them to do before your first meeting, and you send it out via email. Or if you do a Zoom meeting, that shows evidence of leadership competency of communication. Now, I'll talk about the rest of this in a minute. If you go to change management, that's a competency that you have the opportunity to show or highlight in the ABSL. Conflict management, same there. And conflict management is not necessarily disciplinary stuff, but if you got together with your team and you guys are discussing something and there's a disagreement or opposing views and you facilitate through that, you know, how do you resolve that conflict? If you'll notice, creative thinking has an ABSL, but we'll get on down here to, I think it's customer focused. Doesn't say anything about the ABSL. So it's showing this is in MELS 604. This is this is MELS 603. This is MELS 604. So you don't have to put an artifact there. What you need to do to be familiar with all these competencies and go through each of these and even make a list. Okay, this is the ABSL. I need to put an artifact in here. Dialogue and inquiry. I need, doesn't have the ABSL. Don't need to worry about that right now. When I do some of the others, I will. And you go through all 21 competencies. So for 601, you don't have to address all 21 competencies. I think there's 12 of them here that you have to address. So what does that mean by addressing? It's like I said earlier, once you identify a competency that you need to upload an artifact in, then that's all that you do. You just upload the artifact. What can that be? Well, that can be a screenshot, that can be a video clip, that can be a snippet of a document, that can be the actual document that you upload. You don't have to put any narrative with it. You don't have to write any explanation with it. You just upload. You just upload one evidence of an ABSL, one of the artifacts that you created in the ABSL that shows evidence of communication.
What if we have artifacts that aren't necessarily tied to the ABSL or the APTEL or any of these tasks or assignments, but they're just part of our job?
That's a great question. If you'll notice, when you finish the program, each of these evidence each of these competencies should have 3 artifacts contained within them. One is from one of the evidences, in this case, the APSL. Another one would be from the SIOP, which is in 605. And then you have what's called here an open-ended, and that's where you put those. Even in, I think, your syllabus or your scale handbook, it even talks about open-ended, some examples. But so if you go through your internship activities and you've created some artifact, if you did a presentation to a parent and it doesn't necessarily fit as far as the evidence goes, but it's still correlated to communication, then you use that as one of your, I call them wild cards, but you're open-ended. So at the end of the program, each of these competencies here should have 3 artifacts, 2 from the work that you did in your task, and 1 that's open-ended, that's throughout throughout your internship, some other activities that you did. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Is it limited to 3?
No, this is, and that's another really good question. The thing about this is once you create this, you own it. If you go into an interview or you want to send the link to this and share it with the principal or superintendent, whoever you're interviewing with, you can do that as a means of, this is my portfolio showing my evidence of leadership competency. So you can add more in there if you want. You are required to put in 3. If you do more than 3, at the end of the program, all that I am going to expect, though, one has to be from the APSL or the SIOP, and that's not the case for each one. As far as environmental awareness goes, that would be from the CAP and the SIOP. Okay, but these requirements have to be satisfied, and then once those are satisfied, you can put in as many as you want. Good question. All right, so you upload them here, video, attachment, slideshow. You really can make this thing your own. Style, edit content. Don't necessarily want to edit any of this stuff over here, but your style and what it looks like, you can edit all that. So at the end of this semester, you're going to take all those artifacts that you created in an APSL, and you're going to go through each of these, and you're going to find where it's applicable, and you're going to upload them. When you upload them at the end of the program, then you're going to request feedback from me on them. And how do you do that? Well, to do that, you don't click publish and share. If you want to share this with somebody you're interviewing after we've completed the program, then that's how you would do that, and it would send them a link via email. But you don't want to do that with me when you're requesting comments. You click on request comments. You click on request comments, and then you check off the different competencies that you have artifacts in that you want me to review and give feedback. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at those artifacts that you've uploaded for that competency. I'm going to see if that's a good evidence of that competency, and I'm going to let you know if it's not, or something needs to be different, or I'm not understanding what you uploaded. Then I'm going to give you feedback, and you'll get notification of comments from me, and I'm going to guide you through this to polish this thing up as we progress through each semester. Now, at the end of each semester, those competencies have to be satisfied for the APSL. Those artifacts have to be uploaded. So I'm going to make sure that you've done everything that you needed to do for this competency folio before we finish 601. But you highlight the ones that you put artifacts in. If you do this right here, it's going to highlight all of them, and I'm going to have to go through each one and click some type of comment, or I'm going to keep getting notifications. Don't do that to me. Please don't do that to me. Only click on the ones that you put artifacts in, because, man, that takes a lot of time to go through here and type in. You request comments and delegation. Well, there's no artifact. You didn't upload anything in delegation, but I've still got to go in and say there is no artifact for this evidence, or I'm going to continue to get notifications that you're requesting comments. So until I make a comment, it's going to continue to do that. Now, if you get mad at me and you do that, well, there you are. We'll talk about that later, but please don't do that. Okay, once you click on the ones that you've uploaded artifacts to, then you click continue. Now, I don't know what yours is going to look like. Like I said, this is just a sample. My name may be the only name here that you see, or you may see a whole list of names from the different professors and not instructional specialists and clinical coaches that are in the program. You just click on my name, and then you go down here to continue. All right, and what's happened is I just sent myself an email requesting comments for those artifacts that I clicked on. That's how you request comments from me on your artifacts once you upload them in there. Any questions? Okay, I don't want you to request comments right now. When you create your competency folio, I just want you to send me an email and let me know. And that needs to be done within the next 7 days. So I'm going to say, within the next 7 days, create your competency folio, send me an email, and let me know that it's been created. And I can go in and find it at that point in time just to make sure and verify that it's created. But if you'll notice, once I clicked continue, this is what I see. Is when you click, I see comments requested, comment requested, comment requested. That's what I see when somebody sends comments. It'll, of course, be under your name, and I'll pull it up, and this is what it'll look like. And I'll go into conflict management, and I'll say, okay, what did they upload? And is there evidence of conflict management? And then I'll give you some kind of feedback right here. I'll say, evidence or artifact is evidence of leadership competency. And then you'll get, once I click over here where it says submit, the picture, submit, then you'll get notification that I left comments. That's what that looks like. Now, all right, I want to go share one more thing with you, and then we're going to be done. I know I've kept you long. I tell you what, I'll talk about DLCs. Let me make a note. I didn't get to DLCs. I'll talk about DLCs next time since we're kind of gone over their hours. And I'm going to talk about internship hours next time. I'm not going to do that tonight. But if you'll notice here at the bottom, it says internship log in your competency folio. If we go out of this and we go into the DRF, where you upload your APSL, at the bottom of that, you'll notice it says internship log. This is two very important differences, but I'll go over that later. But suffice it to say, don't upload anything about your internship in either place right now until I talk to you again. If you want me to look at your internship log and what you have done so far, send it to me separately in an email. I'll go over next time we talk. I'll talk to you about the difference between those two and when you utilize each of those. But do not upload anything to either one of those items right now. I'm going to check the chat. Okay, question was, if we, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but if you videotape or photograph yourself leading a PLC meeting as an artifact, yes, you can put that in your narrative. You can put it in the appendix and just insert that picture of you leading that PLC. If it's a video clip, have it, I forgot the word, but when you convert it, thank you. When you convert it to YouTube and you get that YouTube link, you can put that in your narrative as well and just make the link active in your narrative. So yeah, you can include those in your artifact. Like you would say, appendix. Appendix A, video of candidate presenting action plan to school leadership team, semicolon, underneath that, put the link to that YouTube video in your appendix. Or if it's a picture, just put the picture in the appendix. So yes, you can do that. It'll go into your narrative, and then when you're ready to do your competency folio, you can pull it out and put it here too. Now remember, we are going to go over all this again. And I'm going to review it again with you when we meet. And then I'm going to kind of focus on those two things that I didn't touch base on. But the main thing that I want you to take away from tonight is make sure you have a good understanding of Absol Task 3 and Absol Task 4, and that you know how to create your competency folio, not your DRF, not your DRF. Competency folio you will find here in the banner. Okay, and then you click on Create New. Don't forget there's a video in my video library in the internship shell that shows you how to do this. So make sure you have a good understanding of Absol Task 3 and 4. Make sure that you know how to create your competency folio. Once you create your competency folio, send me an email within the next 7 days letting me know that it's created. Any questions, any confusion, any part of this, email me. Send me an email and let me know. I apologize for keeping you guys late, later than usual, but it's to the point we need to move forward a little bit with what's required of you. And I wanted to make sure that I got the majority of that covered tonight. Any parting questions? All right, listen, thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate you sticking with me. I know it was a lot of information. We'll go over it again. There's nothing that you have to, other than creating the competency folio, there's nothing that's going to fly into your radar until we meet again. All right, so, but once again, any questions, as always, if you want an individual Zoom meeting, or you want with your peer group, if you want your peer review group, if you want me to Zoom with them or with all of you, just let me know and we'll set up a time to do that. But don't stay confused. Don't keep questions unanswered. Get them out there. Even if it's been asked 100 times before and you're afraid to ask it again, because I'm here to help you. I want you to be successful. I am fully invested in your success in this program because I want to see some good assistant principals and principals out there helping our children. So if there's nothing else, you guys have a safe night. I hope you and your family stay safe. I hope you and your family stay healthy, and God bless you, and we will see you next time. Have a good evening. Thank you for your attention.